NFL Sunday Ticket is now on YouTube and YouTube TV, which means that you can stay close to your team even if you don't live in their town. Like, maybe you're a Raven who married a Seahawk who got a job in the land of the Falcons. With NFL Sunday Ticket, you can watch your team's out-of-market Sunday afternoon games no matter where you live, because you shouldn't have to change teams even if you change towns. NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. Go to youtube.com/presale to get $50 off.
Terms and embargoes apply. Offer ends 9/19. No refund. Subscription auto renews.
What's going on, Giants fans? Welcome to the latest episode of our Talk is Cheap podcast from NJ Advanced Media, the Star Ledger, and NJ.com. It is Thursday, September the 7th in the morning here. Daryl Slater, Bob Brookover with you. And, of course, we are getting ready for the Giants' massive Sunday night, Week 1 season opening game against the Cowboys in MetLife Stadium. Obviously, a huge couple days at MetLife Stadium with the Giants playing on Sunday Night Football against the Cowboys, a division rival, of course, and then the Jets Monday night against the Bills, one of their big division rivals. So, yeah, a lot to talk about here. We last spoke with you guys during training camp, and really, the roster, the way it fell, not a lot of surprises in terms of the cuts and all that stuff in terms of how the depth chart wound up looking. A couple uncertainties still, and we'll get to that. But, yeah, a big tipping point game, and we'll get to that too, even though it is Week 1 against the Cowboys, as the Giants try to finally beat this team, get over the hump, take the next step, all that good stuff after 9-7-1 in the wild card playoff win last year, trying to get past the Eagles and the Cowboys. That's the broad storyline going into this one. Bob, how you doing?
Hey, Daryl, how are you?
Doing all right.
You got a Giants-Jets doubleheader this week.
I do. I'll be doing both.
I don't sleep at all in between games either.
I will be taking a little bit of a nap Monday because my kid is up at 6:30. She can't even catch a football, let alone know what the football schedule is. So she doesn't care. She'll be up 6:30, late night Sunday, late night Monday, but I'll catch a little nap Monday afternoon, Tuesday. Yeah. So, but yeah, look, I mean, some people can't do that, right? I mean, some fans are going to have to watch these games or will want to watch these games, then go to work a full day. So, yeah, if you're going to watch both games, there'll be a couple tired days, Monday, Tuesday.
I would love to. I'm sure there are some people who are both Giants and Jets fans who go to both games. That would be a good story.
Yeah, that's a commitment. If you're going, certainly if you're at home, you turn the TV off, you go to bed at 11:30. But if you're there,
the financial commitment.
Yeah, that would be an interesting doubleheader for sure. But in terms of the Giants here, yeah, I think we can just start very broadly. Like, bottom line is, folks, like we all know, they have to get past the Eagles and Cowboys to conquer this division, to go deeper in the playoffs. The Giants over the last 6 years are 1-11 against the Cowboys. Over the last 10 years, they're 4-16 against them. Yeah, everyone knows they went 0-2 against both teams last year, really 0-3 against the Eagles because of the playoffs. They've lost 4 straight games overall to both teams. Over the last 9 years, Giants 3-16 against the Eagles, and they're over the last 31 games against the Eagles are 6-25. So there's so many numbers that just illustrate the history of how badly the Giants have struggled recently against these two teams, but really none of that matters. But like as our Steve Politi wrote today, if they want to prove these Giants that they are, really a legit long-term contender, go ahead and beat the Cowboys Sunday night. Easier said than done, of course.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that there's a really, really big game on opening day. But for the Giants, this is a really, really big game, especially when you start to map out the schedule beyond here. There's some really tough games in the first 8 for them. And you add that to the fact that the Cowboys have just dominated them for so long. I don't care what Brian Daboll and Joe Shane are saying on the record. They know that this is a time where their team needs to stand up and beat the Cowboys and make a statement in that way. I mean, they've kind of played it down, and so have the players. But I don't think when those doors close and they're getting ready to play that game on Sunday, that they're going to be it's just another game. This is a huge game for them, and they know it.
No question, and you alluded to it, so we can start there. I mean, this early schedule, we all looked at the schedule when it came out, and I think people then get into training camp mode, but let's revisit this. The Giants have 7 of their first 11 games on the road. Really tough opening stretch. There's no bye week until week 13, which is the first week of December. So Yeah, it's a grueling gauntlet early on for the Giants, and they go Dallas, and then of course week 2 they play the Cardinals, and Arizona might be the worst team in the league. So you figure they win that game. They're going to stay out west in Arizona to practice, and then go to San Francisco for week 3. By the way, yes, Nick Bosa will be there. He just signed his contract, and so that's a short week game against one of the best teams in the league in San Francisco. Even though the Giants are staying out there on a Thursday night, so you lose to the Cowboys, you could be looking at 1-2. You beat the Cowboys, you could be looking at 2-1. And it's important to note the Giants get a pretty significant stretch here from week 3 to 4 in terms of the break. It's a Thursday game against the Niners on September the 21st, and then they don't play again. The Giants don't until October the 2nd, a Monday night game in week 4 at home against Seattle. So they could be looking, I think, maybe they're going to be 0-3, maybe 3-0, who knows? But I think most likely it's either 1-2 or 2-1 going into that Seattle game, and it just feels like those two things will feel a whole lot different going into that big break between week 3 and 4.
Absolutely. And when I look at it, I just take it out to 2 more games beyond that Seattle game at Miami, at Buffalo, could be 2 losses, 2 very tough road games against a loaded AFC East team. They're considered, maybe the Dolphins might be the 3rd best team in that conference or in that division, but it's going to be a brutal game for the Giants to win. Tough game to win. So 2-1. 2-1 could lead to 3-1, and then you got some wiggle room no matter what happens in those 2 games if you can get to 3-1.
Yeah, I mean, if you just even look, like you said, at the first 6 games, the Giants have 4 of those on the road in Arizona, in San Francisco, in Miami, and in Buffalo. And of those 6 games, really the Cardinals game is because they go Cowboys, Cardinals, Niners, Seahawks, Dolphins, Bills. All those teams are good except Arizona. So
all playoff teams except Arizona.
Yeah, so the first, and then they get Washington week 7 at home, which is a little bit of a, who knows? I mean, any team can beat any team, but you just look at it.
I like, we can get into that later, but I like the Commanders roster. I'm not necessarily sold on Sam Howell, but I do like their roster, and Sam Howell had a good preseason, so we'll see.
Yeah, but really those first, once in the middle of October, we're going to know a lot more about this Giants team after we get through these first 6 games. Coming out of the Buffalo game Sunday night, October the 15th, the homecoming on several fronts for Brian Daboll, who obviously coached in Buffalo, grew up there. So I think we're going to know a lot more about where this team stands. So, but in terms of this game in particular, we talk about how important it is. So let's get into it in terms of, it's a tipping point game. So what are the tipping points of this game? And you wrote about, we can really just start wherever. It doesn't matter. We'll get to all of it.
Let's start there. The Giants had 0 sacks against the Cowboys.
There you go.
The sack number last year, 8 for the Cowboys, 0 for the Giants. I don't know, the turnover stats is always a big one. And if you turn the ball over more than you get takeaways, you usually lose. I got to think when you give up 8 sacks and have 0 in 2 games, you almost always lose both of those games. And that's what the Giants did last year. In writing about it, I did acknowledge that. And I actually went back and looked at all 9 pressures. Kayvon Thibodeaux had a great game that day. He had 9 pressures. One of them forced an interception by Julian Love. 2 others forced a 3rd down, get off the field for the Giants. Another one should have been called holding, even though it went for a 15-yard gain. It should have been a holding on the Giants tackle Tyler Smith, who's no longer tackle as a guard. But that's great. And even Kayvon said it. I had a great game, but I didn't get any sacks. And you can tell. I talked to both him and Aziz this week. You can tell that those 2 guys just know that they are going to play a huge role in whether the Giants win this game or not.
No doubt about it, for several reasons. Obviously, the Cowboys have really good fronts on both sides of the ball. As it pertains to those 2 guys, their offensive line is really good. And the fact that the Giants are rolling out this revamped secondary, and as I mentioned this, I'll let everyone knows how good the Cowboys offensive line is, and established guys, Tyron Smith. In terms of pass blocking, last year, the Cowboys actually were only 15th in PFF. but you're talking about established offensive linemen in terms of the run block, 11th last year. So
Tyron Smith missed 13 games last year too. So
thank you. Yep, you're right. And that's why they didn't face him. And this year they will. He's an elite offensive tackle, elite left tackle. And so, yeah, I think that one of the other reasons why they need to get pressure is this secondary, this revamped group for the Giants. Like how much you got CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks, and Michael Gallup going against when the Giants roll out their nickel. Two outside rookie corners, Trey Hawkins and Deonte Banks, with Adoree Jackson, the number one corner, moving into somewhat of an unfamiliar role in the slot. Risky. I mean, like, there's no other way to slice it. It's an intriguing but risky alignment from Wink Martindale.
Absolutely, it's and then you take into account also that Jason Pinnock, who a year ago at this time wasn't even getting on the field, he was a late summer waiver claim. So now you got a guy who's really pretty inexperienced at safety too, replacing Julian Love. So, your only two experienced guys are Xavier McKinney and Adoree. And as you mentioned, Adoree is playing in a role that he really hasn't a whole lot in his career. So the Giants secondary, defensively, it's the biggest question mark they have. Last year, obviously, stopping the run was a real problem for the Giants. I really do think they've addressed that by bringing in Bobby Okereke, although they're not great at the other inside linebacker spots. Still, they were hoping that was going to be Jarrett Davis at the start of the offseason, but he gets hurt. But I think Okereke really addresses that issue, as well as, you already had a very good interior defensive line that you added depth to this offseason. So when you look at the totality of the defense, the biggest question mark is that the young corners and a safety who hasn't played the position a whole lot either.
For sure, and you alluded to it. The weak side linebacker will be Micah McFadden. He won that job, beat out Darian Beavers pretty handily. Beavers sticks around in the practice squad. So yeah, not only I think will Okereke be helpful in the run, he's a faster player, an upgrade there from what the revolving door they had last year, and should really help this team in coverage. He's an every down linebacker as we've mentioned, and so that will be that will be an upgrade there. And that kind of ties into what Wink Martindale said Wednesday, when he spoke to reporters about why he thinks this defense can be elite in 2023. And he said the speed upgrade, and that really Bobby Okereke is the most indicative upgrade in terms of from where they were last year. And let's be honest, over big picture wise, this was not an elite defense last year. I think Wink Martindale gets a lot of credit because he does some good things. He did do some good things last year. He brings a lot of pressure. He's runs his defense in kind of the sexy way. He's this big personality, kind of folksy. But they allowed 21.8 points a game last year. That's 17th in the league. All right, that's not elite. They were really good in the red zone, really good in third down, 5th in the NFL in both of those things. But in terms of a play-in, play-out basis, PFF had them, and then had them. I mean, these are ratings. They're not just random rankings. 30th overall, 28th against the run, 20th in pass rush, and 31st in coverage. Now, they had attrition in the secondary. I get it. They blitz a ton. They didn't get home enough and didn't get enough sacks. And they need a better they need Kayvon Thibodeau to be more efficient. Dexter Lawrence can't just be their only really good pass rusher. So,
the one thing I'm sorry, the one thing to
will that speed help? Well, I mean, will they actually be elite?
Well, and then they did it at an X factor here late in the preseason when they got Isaiah Simmons from the Cardinals for next to nothing, 7th round pick. And I am really eager to see what Wink Martindale does with him. I think we're going to see him on the field quite a bit, especially on passing downs. I think he's going to be a major blitzer for Wink's defense, but to me, he is the real X factor for this defense.
Great point. I mean, he's a guy who's listed as a backup will linebacker behind a weak side will linebacker behind Micah McFadden right now, but he really is a kind of that hybrid safety linebacker. Could be a blitzer in sub packages, sort of I guess like Dane Belton. We'll see what his role will be in things like the dime package. He's, I guess, their number 3 safety right now. He's listed as a number 2 strong safety behind Pinnock. And really Bobby McCain has just been an afterthought. But yeah, Belton, Simmons, couple hybrid-y type players. They could pop for a big play here and there. Not going to be starters. And then while we're on the topic of these sub packages and the kind of the depth, not necessarily a versatile player here, but just like a guy who can get in the mix, because you've mentioned this before about their depth at edge rusher for when they do go to these third down packages. Like Boogie Basham is in now via trade. Essentially, the Bills are going to cut him. A low cost trade for the Giants. O'Shane Ximenez kind of out on the practice squad, so it's Jihad Ward and Boogie Basham as the backup edge rushers. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we both love talking to Jihad Ward. He's a character, and he filled a very vital role for them last season. I mean, when I went back and did a series just before the start of training camp on the 11 most important Giants on offense, on offense and defense, he fit into that group at that time. And that was based on what he did last year. He played more snaps, which there's no way the Giants thought that was going to happen. More snaps than he ever had in his career, and played a very vital role. But he's just not an elite pass rusher. He's not, it's I don't know what the best analogy would be, but like you have two pretty good pass rushers, two I think potentially elite pass rushers as starters, but it really tails off. There's not a third and fourth guy to come in and keep that rotation going, which hurts, because there's no way these guys can play 100% of the plays.
The Jets can, I mean, it's a Giant podcast, obviously, but this kind of reminded me of the Jets. They can come at you in waves with their pass rushers. I mean, the depth they have there is just remarkable. The Giants less so, and I think it's, as you mentioned, it is intriguing too, because they want to. Maybe Wink Martindale wants to get after the quarterback a lot. I mean, he blitzes more than anybody in the NFL, which is why, yeah, maybe a guy like Simmons could play, as you said, such an important role, because they kind of know what Ward is and what they have in him. Like, let's see if Simmons or maybe Basham can step up and be, as a younger player, that type of depth addition pass rush.
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to rush the passer, they're going to have to do it in different ways than just with dominating edge rushers. Even though they have two good ones, capable. We'll go to this later, but I'll be surprised. I'm going to be surprised if Thibodeau doesn't approach double-digit sacks or get double-digit sacks this year. But
wow,
and based on what Aziz has done, Ojulari has done in his career, you'd say that would be a possibility for him too. Obviously, he couldn't stay healthy last year, but he, he's shown a penchant for the sack when he's in the game.
When you look at just the pressure numbers last year, like how close, really, Kayvon Thibodeau in particular got. I mean, the team leader in pressures by PFF was Dexter Lawrence at 63 by far. You can make the case he was one of the top 3 defensive players in the entire NFL overall. Thibodeau, 40 pressures last year. PFF had him for just 4 sacks. But, I mean, that was in 14 games. I mean, 40 pressures in 14 games, pretty good.
Yep.
Ojulari.
The thing about Kayvon, though, is a ton of those came in just 2 games. The Cowboys game and the Commanders game down there. So there were games where he didn't flash as much. They need him to be that guy more consistently.
He had 9 pressures in the Dallas game and down there, and then Thanksgiving. And then so 9 of his 40 there. And so, yeah, I mean, they need him to get home and to be more efficient. I mean, his pass rush grade was like 68 last year in PFF, which is great. So they've got to have him be a more efficient pass rusher. His best grades were at Washington, that monster game he had pass rush wise. They had him for only 2 pressures in that, but an 88 pass rush grade, and an 80 against the Cowboys by far. In Thanksgiving, those are by far his 2 best games grade wise for pass rush. So they need more of that. They need more of those high end 80s, and 5-6 pressure games. He's a really important player for this defense, especially as we alluded to with how revamped the secondary is. It would be unreasonable to expect a guy like Trey Hawkins to go out there and hold up for a long time against someone like Cooks, Lamb, Gallup, that whole trio. So
No, I really can't wait to watch to see how those guys do. That's to me that is defensively the most intriguing thing we're going to watch on Sunday night is how those two rookies hold up. And they put. I'll say this: they put on a good face, both of them.
Yeah.
Deontay Banks is a very confident kid. You can see it in the locker room. And 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 outgoing. He's not a great interview, but he's when you watch him interact with his teammates, he's very outgoing. Where as Trey Hawkins has got a quiet confidence about him, so it's going to be fun to see.
I will say this for the secondary, they are not shying away from what is just an enormous challenge in week one. Dory Jackson was saying of the Cowboys receivers, it's a great group to go against. And then he kind of paused and smiled. He said, to showcase us as a defense, it's just going to be a great way to display us and our talents and what we do, what we want to do. A little bit of certainly a confidence in there, not a lot of deferential
Right.
words.
Not blustery, but
Yeah.
it's a great quote, really.
Yeah, and so let's see if it holds up because, as we mentioned, Adoree Jackson also he really played really well last year, but this slot thing is a bit new for him, and they're going to play their nickel a lot, as we all know. So, yeah, I think that is anything else defensively that pertains to. I think we covered a lot, big picture wise there, and as it pertains to this game, right?
I think we did, at least on the defensive side of the ball.
Switching to offense, I think I looked up the stat going into this game. I saw a fan tweet this, so I just went and confirmed it. It was a good stat that someone put out there. Obviously, the Giants lost to the Cowboys twice last year. Week 3, they lose 23-16. The Giants only had 336 yards in that game, and the Giants only had 13 points until a field goal with about 3.5 minutes left. Okay, so that's really hard to win with 13 or 16 points in the NFL. Thanksgiving, the Giants wind up scoring 20, right? They lose 28-20. They only had 300 yards, though. But maybe some people forget this. The Giants only had 13 until they had like a garbage touchdown with 8 seconds left. Again,
the Giants really. I mean, the one thing to remember about that second game is they were really beat up. They had gotten a ton of injuries against the Lions the week before. Had a short week, and they were winning going into halftime. And a big reason for that was the way Thibodeau and the defense played. It was 13-6 at the half, and then the Cowboys came out in the second half and kind of had their way with the defense and the Giants just didn't have enough. They had a makeshift offensive line and didn't really have enough to present a challenge offensively.
They need to. I think it would be unreasonable to expect the Giants to hold the Cowboys like defensively to under like 20. I mean, the Cowboys scored 27.5 points last year a game. They were 4th in the NFL. The Giants 21.5, 16th in the NFL. So can this Giants offense help win, for lack of a better term, a shootout against the Cowboys on Sunday night?
Yeah, I think they're more capable than certainly they were last year. The Waller factor is a big one, but not the only one. Wink Martindale mentioned his team speed for his defense, and the team that also applies on offense. That they're just a faster team. I asked this question of Mike Kafka and didn't really get an answer I was looking for yesterday. But can your skill players make your offensive line better? I believe they can because if they're open and your quarterback doesn't have to hold the ball as long and make as many plays with his legs because you're getting guys open in different spots, that will make the offensive line better if you can just have plays on time in a passing game. And they Daniel Jones has more guys he can go to, and it starts with Darren Waller, but it also includes Jalen Hyatt. I think the increased number of good skill players helps Darius Slayton. Paris Campbell's got speed that doesn't get talked about a lot because when you talk about speed, it usually goes to Jalen Hyatt, the rookie. But there are a lot of weapons, and I was talking to Daniel Bellinger the other day, and I was just talking about Darren Waller, and he's like, yeah, he's amazing. Said, and it's going to help me too. And then I thought about the one drive the offense played together. It was against the Panthers, I guess it was. Jones went all over the place, and then it ended with him finding Bellinger wide open in the end zone. And we go back and look at the play. It's because two defenders went to Darren Waller, and one of them left Bellinger alone in the end zone. So there's a lot of different ways for Daniel Jones to go that he didn't have a year ago.
For sure. A lot of this, I mean, can this Giants offense be a more explosive deep passing game, whether it's, throwing the ball deep or medium range passes that the speed turns into long gains? I mean, we've gone over it so many times. Basically, the worst team in the NFL in 20-plus yard passes over the last 3 years. I think literally the worst the last 2 years, and then second to worst in 2020. So that has to change. And it's not just about, I think, the speed and the playmakers, but this line, which not just question. Okay, so like Evan Neal questions, right? Like, can he play better? Andrew Thomas, we know what he is. John Michael Schmitz, he's the center, right? So, he's a rookie center, right? What to expect. But also like legit questions about, at least externally, they surely know internally, who's going to start at left guard and right guard, and how are they going to handle that?
Yeah. I'll ask you first. What do you think they're going to do?
I think they will. I do not think they're going to start with a rotation initially. I think they will roll with Mark Lewinsky at right guard, and I think Ben Bredeson will be their left guard. Now, I think they're going to try to, I think this is just an educated guess, let this see how it plays out in terms of these guys playing both those guys playing every snap, right? So then see if they need to do a rotation. I don't think they're going to roll into it with a rotation. If, say, like, Glowinski struggles or Bredeson struggles, then you could see a potential like Bredeson Glowinski rotation at right, or Josh Ezeudu, Bredeson at left.
I actually think you just nailed it. I think there's going to be not going to be a rotation after we watch one all training camp, all preseason. I think you're going to see Glowinski at right guard and Bredeson at left guard to start the season, and let them try to prove themselves. There's an interesting stat about Bredeson. When he started last year, the Giants were 10-3.
Wow.
So, I don't know how much of a reflection that is on him, but 10-3 is a good record. So I just think that's the best way to go. Kafka, one thing he said, and this was during training camp, about the midpoint of training camp, he basically said in his mind it's ideal to have the five best guys on the field. I don't know if you remember him saying that at the midpoint. Whereas it was the only allusion by him or Daboll that it was the only time either one of them alluded to, hey, that's what we'd like to do. Which is
that makes sense, right? It makes sense.
More than we often get from either one of them. So.
I mean, there's a reason teams typically don't do it. It's because starting five guys and keeping them out there every snap is the ideal situation. And so
communication is so important among the offensive line, and you got to think the more you have five guys together, the better that communication is going to be.
For sure, and I think they'll just let the results dictate whether they need to do a rotation. They're not going to – I don't think it would make a lot of sense to just go in with a rotation. Like, let's see what happens in week one. Not that they're using these games, these really important regular season games, as like auditions, but okay, right. Like, do they need to do a rotation, or is it okay? Is it fine to not have one? I mean,
right. We kind of saw last year that, they don't really want to do that because after 2 games last year, Bredeson became the left guard. Then he got hurt in Jacksonville in week 7. So, and then chaos. It was chaos at the position after that. But that was the telltale sign that they don't really want to do that.
I think no matter how you slice it, though, like, okay, so the options at right guard are Glowinski or Bredeson. The option at left guard are Ezeudu or Bredeson. Everyone gets that by now, so that's how they could do it. Schmitz, rookie center, a lot of questions. No matter how you slice it, like, you're not talking about among these 4 players, Schmitz, Bredeson, Ezeudu, Glowinski, like an established in some cases, or like dominant player. So no matter who they throw out there at those 3 interior spots, there's a lot of question marks about the interior line.
Right. No, there definitely is. That's and that's the one place you can really hurt a quarterback is by bringing pressure up the middle. And I wrote about this with John Michael Schmitz the other day. About what he's going to face. The Cowboys don't necessarily have a great tackle that they'll throw in front of him, but he's going to face a lot of great defensive tackles before this season's over. It starts in who's week 2? Week 2 is the Cardinals. Then week 3, he's going to get Javon Hargrave, in his face. When they play the Eagles, those guys are rookies. Two guys with not a lot of experience, but Jordan Davis, NJ and Carter are going to be coming at him. Not to mention Fletcher Cox is still a veteran. The whole list. You go down the list, and it's an imposing thing that sits in front of him for sure.
And speaking of imposing in terms of what the Giants line will face, obviously the interior line, a big storyline, but also how in the world are they going to stop Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence? Let's start with Evan Neal. Last year, he played the Cowboys once because of his injury, right? And then he got 2 games against the Eagles, the one in the regular season, one in the playoffs, because the Giants didn't play their starters in the regular season finale. So week 3 against Dallas last year, Neal just got absolutely owned. 5 pressures allowed, 3 sacks, a 27 pass rush grade. And then he goes and is even worse against the Eagles at home. 8 pressures allowed, 1 sack allowed, a 20 pass rush grade, which is atrocious, his worst of what was an underwhelming rookie year. And then the playoff game, actually only 2 pressures allowed, no sacks, but he only had a 40 pass rush grade. So it wasn't as bad. But even still, yeah, I mean, he's got to be better against the imposing pass rushers that those 2 teams present. And that starts against the Parsons, Lawrence, and the Cowboys.
Yeah, and I just don't know. All the right things were said about Evan Neal. We expect him to be better. He had a good off season. He changed his stance. He worked hard. But there's just no way. But he also had a little stretch there where he was hurt in training camp. There's just no way until right now, starting Sunday, how improved he is. There's just no 2 ways about it. The one thing I think that you could look to positively about his rookie season was, okay, so you look at his PFF grades starting with week 1, 40, 54, 45, 52, 56. And then against Baltimore, he was a 70. It was his best game of the season until Indianapolis late in the season when he was a 73. But he was a 70 and then a 62 before he got hurt against Jacksonville. And then he came back and it was like, okay, he's starting from scratch again, trying to get healthy and get right. But there was signs that he was improving as the year went on before getting hurt. Then in the 2 playoff games, he was not real good either against Minnesota.
Yeah, I misspoke on that, actually. He did play in 25 snaps in the regular season finale, meaningless game, 2 pressures allowed, 40 grade. That was the one where I said he wasn't that bad. Actually, in reality, he was very bad. In the divisional game, he allowed 5 pressures in Philadelphia in that divisional game. So I misspoke a little there. He did play the Eagles 3 times.
He didn't have a good rating in that Eagles game either. That the last game of the season, it was actually his worst rating of the year.
Yeah.
Too. So,
yeah. So
I mean, they can say everything they want, and Evan can say everything he wants, and but until you do it, the popular thing that people like to do is like, well, Andrew Thomas had a really rough rookie year, and look what happened with him. But that's great. But Evan Neal has for just to put it in a analogy term, has a lot bigger hole to crawl out of than Andrew Thomas did after his rookie year.
Andrew Thomas, you got to remember, really finished his rookie year on an uptick. He played better as the season went on, whereas Evan Neal, now granted the knee, as you mentioned, a mitigating factor, did not play better. He played worse as the season went on, and so that's certainly something. And he changed his pass blocking stance. We'll see. And the flip side of that too is, Andrew Thomas, really good player, got paid this offseason. He's on his way to being one of the better consistent left tackles in the league. He did not play well against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving last year. He allowed 3 pressures, a 56.9 pass block grade. That was his worst. His second worst was actually the Week 14 home game against the Eagles. The Giants lost that one. 63 pass rush grade, 3 pressures allowed. Other than that, he was really, really good.
Right.
He allowed 23 pressures all year. He had basically a 90 pass blocking grade. And so just those 2 games stand as outlier. And he was really good. He was actually very good. Andrew Thomas was in the divisional game against the Eagles, even though the Giants were terrible in that game. That was his 5th best pass, for what it's worth, 5th best pass blocking grade of the year. So he played the Eagles twice, played the Cowboys twice. In the week 3 game, he was fine against the Cowboys. Andrew Thomas was, but not so much on Thanksgiving. So really, Neal and Thomas, huge factors in this one.
Yeah, and to me, we mentioned it already that the young cornerbacks are the biggest question mark for the defense, and what we find what the Giants offense do will revolve around what the offensive line is capable of doing. That's the biggest question mark for them. If they have to be better than last year as a group. We're just talking about Evan Neal a second ago. He has to be better, but as a group, they have to be better if the Giants are going to take the next step in the progression they're hoping to take. That's the most vital part of the offense. I think they have the weapons. I really do. I think they have the weapons to be a better offense. The one thing that it ended up being a very weird training camp in that the only thing we talked about heading into training camp was Saquon Barkley, and then he surprises us all and signs the tag and comes in. And we barely talked about him, and he never got on the field. But the fact that he's still there and they have these other receiving weapons makes the Giants offense very, very interesting. Because that was my thought as I watched that 10-play drive in the preseason was, it's all passing. At some point they're going to also insert Saquon into this and be even more dynamic as an offense.
That's the goal, certainly, to have that kind of 1-2 punch with Barkley and Waller. And obviously we all know an enormous second straight prove-it year for Saquon Barkley, playing on the franchise tag. So we'll see what that all means for him. And by the way, he's kind of been an afterthought, he being, well, Barkley to some degree, but Daniel Jones. Okay. So let's not lose sight of the fact that this is still kind of a prove-it situation for him. Yeah, he got paid $82 million on what is essentially a 2-year contract. But there's the emphasis. It's a 2-year contract. The Giants have an escape hatch after 2024, even after that minor restructuring they did. He needs to, if he goes out and lays an egg this year, he's on the quote-unquote hot seat entering next year in terms of, what are they going to do with him after 2024? So let's see if he can go out and justify the contract. There are questions about the line. He has better weapons. This offense should be more explosive, you'd think. So it's been a weird summer in that, the Barkley storyline kind of overshadowed Jones going into camp. Then during camp, there were so many other things to talk about. Jones was steady. He was fine. He played the one drive. He was steady. He was fine. That he just was kind of this weird afterthought. Oh, and then, by the way, you had that, that other guy at the Jets who just is always making news, and Aaron Rodgers, happy. He's happy to have the spotlight, craves it, probably needs it. Jones would rather just not have anyone look at him, but he's about to go to the microscope now.
I did the fun story on him this week of the video, and I don't know if you ever went and watched the video of him in the Hugo Boss store trying to sell Giants shirts. And I talked to him about it, and he said half the people didn't recognize him. He said some of them didn't look up, but even after they looked up, they were looking at him, didn't recognize him. This is the quarterback of the New York Giants. Could you imagine Aaron Rodgers going into a Hugo Boss store? Everybody would know who he is. And Daniel Jones embraces that people don't recognize him. But let me ask you this. What do you think Daniel Jones is going to do this year? Which way do you think he's going to go? Ascend, descend?
It's a lame answer, but I think you're going to see a lot of the same in terms of his production. I don't think he's a guy
he's about to ascend. I really do.
I don't think he's a guy. I mean, he was 14th in the NFL in quarterback rating last year. That doesn't obviously take into account running, but he was the same spot in PFF ratings, which does take into account running. I don't think he's a top 5, top 8, maybe even top 10 quarterback. I just think that this is who this guy is. They had no choice but to pay him. I get it. They made a smart move by not guaranteeing him money into the third year. But I don't see a situation where he goes out and lights it up. That doesn't mean they're not going to win, say 9 or 10 games, make the playoffs. But like, is he, as I look at him right now, do I see enough of in his body of work to say he's a guy who can lead a team to win the Super Bowl? No, I don't think that. I think that just looking at what he's done, I don't think so.
I think the difference between me and you is the lens with which we have watched Daniel Jones. I always watched him from afar and never all that closely before last year. And watching him last year and just watching the way he goes about his business and the way his teammates, and Darius Slayton becomes the one I think of the most, who just really, would run through a wall for the guy. I see a guy who finally had some things around him and things go right when the franchise was just a mess, and persevered through all that, and now is finally getting the weapons that you need to be an elite NFL quarterback. And I'm going to be surprised if he doesn't ascend into at least the top 10. I really am. Now, last year he had 15 touchdown passes, correct? To get into that elite, he's got to go, to me, increase that by like 10, at least 25. Because and for him, I think that puts him in the elite because of what he can do with his legs. I'm sure the Giants would like him to have to do less because he's not under as much pressure as he was a year ago. But I really think you're about to see a guy really ascend into become an elite quarterback.
What's interesting about that stat is that he, as a rookie, he had 24 touchdown passes in 13 games. He didn't play in the one that much. So he started 12 games. They went 3-9 in his games as a starter, and he had 24 touchdown passes. So
he had more weapons then, though.
Yeah, and so
still there, right?
Then over the next 3 years, 11, 10, and 15 touchdown passes, and so. Yeah, obviously last year was his best quarterback rating by far, 92.5. And so I think that, clearly he's a big, it's an enormous storyline for whether he can take that next step. I mean, yes, a lot of it depends on protection and playmakers, but I think we've gotten into this thing where we talk about him in the context of like what's around him. Like, sorry, but like the quarterback still controls a lot, and his skill level and his competence and his ability to improve, not only himself, but the players around him still dictates a lot, right? So it's not just like, oh, he's this guy who's dependent on all these things around him. Like, no, I mean, he's a really important player who's going to have to do a lot on his own, and no situation is ever going to be perfect. And do the Giants have the perfect situation? No. But I think it's now he's got the pieces around him, even though it's still not perfect. Let's go see what he can do. Can he justify this contract?
Yeah, it's absolutely about that. And like you said, it's really only a 2-year deal, so he's still playing to prove something, which he should be. I mean, 1 year never proves anything. To me, the great stat, and I forget the exact stat what it is, but it's been like 20-something years since a quarterback has lost the Super Bowl and then gone back to the Super Bowl. So like the last 20 quarterbacks who've lost the Super Bowl have not gone back. So it tells you that 1 year does not prove anything.
Not the next year going back. Yeah,
what's that?
They didn't go back the next year, but yeah.
No, they didn't go back at all.
What about Mahomes?
Lost the quarterback in the first time they played in the Super Bowl. That's the stat. I'm sorry.
Oh, the first time. Okay.
The first time they played in the Super Bowl. That if they lost it the first time they played in the Super Bowl, they never went back.
Okay. Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that because obviously Mahomes they lost.
Right. That's the stat was that lost the first time they played in the Super Bowl, lost, and it goes back into the 90s. I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
Which is pretty amazing. But it's also proof that 1 year think about like somebody like Matt Ryan, if he had won that Super Bowl that the Falcons absolutely choked against the Patriots, he'd be looked at in a much different light than he is now. But anyway, Yeah, I just when I look at Daniel Jones, and maybe it's because that last year was the first time I really got to take a deep look at him. I just see a guy who has the ability to be really an elite guy in this league, but he's got to prove it. You got to see it. And I thought we saw a lot of glimpses of it last year.
And now that storyline becomes front and center after being overshadowed by little, lesser things, I think, in training camp. That's sort of how it goes. The microscope is here for Daniel Jones. And just a couple more nuggets on offense. And we talked about all this big picture stuff, but just to drill down on a few other things. It'd be interesting to see like what they do. Like we don't have to get too much into this, but like with their backup line situation, they have Shane Lemieux listed as a backup center and left guard right now. He made the team, which I thought good story, good, nice guy. But I think if we kind of know what they're going to do if one of their tackles gets hurt. Matt Parrott is the swing backup. We kind of know what it looks like if one of their guards get hurt because Azudu can be a backup or Glowinski or Bredesen. The center situation is an interesting one because I don't know if Lemieux would be their first choice. I think maybe they would put Bredesen at center and put Lemieux as the starting left guard, but it's not like Bredesen or Lemieux has a ton of really any experience at center. So that's a big one to watch. They cannot afford an injury, especially this year to their center. I mean, anyone can say that most years, but I don't know. That's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you can put Bredesen there and then put Azudu at left guard. I was surprised that Lemieux made the team just because he's not been on the field for the last 2 years.
And he was down the depth chart in camp, yeah.
Right, he was down the depth chart for a while there. He wasn't even, they had been running him at center, the second team center, and then he wasn't even running. Harlow was running at second team center instead of him. He was running with guards. So you wondered, okay, is that experiment over? But he's still listed there. But I think they would go with Bredesen ahead of Lemieux if it came to that. I'm sure they're hoping it doesn't, but the course of an NFL season, it is a war of attrition. So we'll see what that's a big thing too. That is the one thing I think that gets is under the radar a little bit is that the Giants, while an improved roster from a year ago by far, are still not real deep in a lot of places, and we alluded to it at the edge rusher spots, but it's also very true to me on the offensive line. There's just a lot of places that they would be in trouble if certain position groups, almost all of them, go down. So I think they still have a depth issue.
Yes, and Sean Harlow now on the Cowboys practice squad, so he did not stick around in the Giants practice squad. And just speaking of depth, and this can actually tie into some health stuff and injuries, but what do you Jalen Hyatt listed as second team outside receiver behind Isaiah Hodgins, and then we'll talk about Wan'Dale Robinson in a minute. He's listed as behind in the slot behind Paris Campbell. They have Sterling Shepard behind Darius Slayton on the outside in their depth chart. But let's start with Hyatt real quick. Reasonable expectations for him as a rookie?
I don't think he's going to have like this breakout year, be a 1,000-yard receiver, because I don't think he's going to be on the field enough to do that. I think he's going to be a guy gets on the field and when they want to take a deep shot, he's going to be in the field. He's going to play quite a bit, I think. But I think he's going to have some growing pains his first year. I'm eager to see how teams defend him. If it was me, I would have somebody in his face every chance I got. If he's lining up standstill, I definitely have somebody in his face trying to be physical with him. I'm sure that Kafka and Daboll are going to motion him a lot to try to prevent that from happening. But I can see him having a solid years, a few touchdowns, but not a breakout year.
And of course, he being Hyatt being the intriguing rookie receiver this year. That guy last year was Wan'Dale Robinson, in the second round pick. Season was derailed by injuries, a couple knee injuries, the latter being a torn ACL in late November. But he is back; he's off the PUP list. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think you'll see him week one. Let's just run through real quick. The Giants do not practice today. It's Thursday. They have an off day. Their first injury report came out yesterday, Wednesday. So they'll do an estimate today. And then they'll be getting back on the schedule next week, where Tuesday's the off day. And so we'll do this podcast on Tuesday going forward most weeks. But the injury report yesterday, nobody did not practice. The limited participant guys were Gary Brightwell with a knee, Cam Brown ankle, Lawrence Cager ankle, DJ Davidson knee, Cordell Flott hamstring, Gervarius Owens hamstring. Again, those are all backup guys, but Wan'Dale Robinson's with a knee limited again. So like we don't need to get into all those guys, but Wan'Dale Robinson probably not. I don't think he'll play week 1, right? Do you agree?
He's going to have to work his way back on the field. He barely participated in training camp. Didn't play in a preseason game. Didn't come off the pup to very late in training camp. Almost before the rosters were pretty much before the rosters had to be finalized. So, I actually talked to him yesterday, and he said he's feeling really good, but he also said he was a full participant in practice, which the injury report contradicted. I don't think we're going to see him week 1. He's going to have to work his way back. And, if we learned anything from last season, the starting wide receivers on opening day last year were Kenny Galladay, David Sills, and Kadarius Toney. So things can change in the NFL quickly, and they did for the Giants last year. So, and actually talked to him about that last year. We said stuff happens not quite in those terms, and he's like, "Yeah, you're right. Stuff does happen. Stuff happened to him last year. His very first NFL catch, he got hurt, was out for 3 or 4 weeks." Came back and looked like he was really getting into a groove. Had, his last catch was put him over 100 yards, put him at 100 yards for that game against Detroit, but it also suffered torn ACL and didn't play again. Now here he is, but he'll get his chance at some point because of that, because of the guys going down. And you could tell he had flashes and had talent last year. So we'll see how he comes back from this ACL at some point, but I don't think right away. I agree.
Yeah, certainly an intriguing piece for this Giants defense. And in terms of the health, you did a piece on this about how much healthier they are. I mean, I ran down the injuries, and you're talking about, not to like diss any of those guys, but no one there that, like, if all those, none of those guys are particularly like super important. So in terms of their top line important guys, they're very, very healthy.
They are, and that's much different than a year ago, because Ojulari and Thibodeau both missed the first 2 games of the season last year. Kadarius Toney was nursing a hamstring that then floated to his other hamstring before he floated to Kansas City, and won a Super Bowl with a touchdown and a game-changing punt return.
Yeah, played pretty well.
He did. He was quite a story.
Now he's hurt again, but it looks like he'll play tonight.
He was the craziest story of last season. But this team is definitely much healthier going into this season. That can change in one night. But we'll see. The last preseason game was interesting because they had a bunch of guys hurt, but the important ones were all in the sideline protection program. So nobody of great significance got hurt. Probably the guy that of most significance got hurt that day was Bryce Ford Wheaton, who was going to be, a down the depth chart receiver and a special teams guy. But unfortunately for him, he tore his ACL.
And just in terms of guys, I mean, they have no one who's on IR right now will be able to come back. I mean, you're talking about Jared Davis, Bryce Ford Wheaton, J.C. Hasnauer, Chris Myrick. Those guys, I presume, are either out for the season or they're not, or not like super consequential. They got Tommy Sweeney, a tight end, who's a roster fringe guy anyway, in that non-football injury list. Who knows? I mean, obviously a scary medical situation for him in camp, but Aaron Robinson's still dealing with a torn ACL. He's still on PUP. He has just not been able to stay healthy. Has been rendered kind of an afterthought in the secondary. They do have Cole Beasley on the practice squad IR, which is the same as regular season IR. He's got to miss at least 4 games. He's a guy who maybe could provide some depth. He's old. He's 34 years old. So he's someone to maybe keep an eye on down there. He's dealing with a quad injury, so nothing that's going to be, I think maybe the 4 games and then he comes back. We'll see. But that all ties into just how healthy the Giants are right now going into this game. And, let's let's see if it manifests itself into some results. They're going to have a rookie punt returner in Eric Gray. Big stage for him. He's sort of a somewhat forgotten rookie. It's not like we need to get too much into that, but we will be getting into it if he screws up this week. But yeah, we covered pretty much everything there, Bob, except the big one, which is the pick for the game and the pick for the season. So I'm going to pull it out of my backside here on at least the pick for the game. But do you want to go first here on the pick for the game? You want me to lead off?
Go ahead. You lead off.
I don't see the Giants winning this game. I don't think they're going to be able to score enough points to keep up with the Cowboys. I am going to pick 35-24 for the Cowboys. That was literally 1 second ago I thought of that score, so don't bet your life savings on it. But that's what I'm going with for this one. I'll let you go on the game, and then we'll go with season picks.
Well, I'll read you exactly what I'm writing because tomorrow morning I'm going to put out my full season prediction column. And I've already gotten to week 1, and here's what I say: the Cowboys have won 11 of the last 12 meetings between the teams. But this is the Giants' most talented team in quite some time. With a depleted roster that wasn't as talented last year on Thanksgiving, the Giants pushed the Cowboys hard before losing. It's time for this rivalry to start turning the other way. Giants 27, Cowboys 24. I think it's going to be a great game. A really fun opening night game. But I think the Giants had a better offseason too than the Cowboys. I really do. I think they upgraded their roster more than the Cowboys did. The Cowboys also are Tyler Smith, who we mentioned before, got dominated by Kayvon Thibodeau as a left tackle rookie matchup last year, matchup of first round picks. Kayvon really won that. Tyler Smith's now moved to guard, but he's also I think it's a hamstring problem. I know, what's that?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, a hammy.
He's dealing with a hamstring issue, which it's not a minor thing for the Cowboys because they're dealing with some monsters at guard for the Giants. At defensive tackle for the Giants. So that could be something to watch on Sunday night. But I like the Giants in this game. I think they've really been looking forward to this game for a long time now. I think. I don't care. Daboll never says anything like this, but I guarantee you, since OTAs, he's circled this date and this game is let's go. This is where we start to prove ourselves.
I mean, would you agree the Cowboys are more talented on paper still than the Giants?
Yeah, but I think the talent gap is closed. And now you're talking about a team that's home and it's opening night. So I think you take in all those factors. I haven't gotten to the second Giants-Cowboys game yet down in Dallas, but I think out of the chute that the Giants are going to be ready to play this game and prove something.
Yes, and we didn't even, you mentioned Monsters in the Middle. Dexter Lawrence, probably the best player in the entire team last year. We didn't even mention him once. Speaking of guys you take for granted in terms of the success, but that is an important storyline with Tyler Smith banged up a little bit there, in terms of Dexter Lawrence being able to affect Dak Prescott a little bit. Another guy's name, you kind of assume, everyone, Dak Prescott, right? And so let's see what Dexter Lawrence does there. But in terms of my pick for the game, I gave it. I will say for the season, I'm going to stick with what I had in May. I might go through this and do some different individual game changes, but I'm going to say we don't need to go through every game, but I still will have the Giants at 10-7, making the playoffs. Another loss on divisional round weekend is what I had in May, and I'm going to stick to that. That's where I think they're at right now in terms of this progression. But again, I'll have that. My game-by-game picks for later, I guess Saturday. What do you have for the Giants' record, and how deep, if at all, they go in the playoffs?
Yeah, I haven't gone through my whole thing. In May, I picked 10-7. I may alter that a little bit to 11-6, but I'm not positive yet. I'm going through it game by game. Here's the interesting. I got them 10-7 or 11-6. I'm not sure which way I'm going to go yet with this as I look through this today. And I think I got them making the playoffs again too. But the thing about the Giants is I think they are more talented than a year ago. Better roster, better team, but the schedule is tougher, and the division is still brutal between the Cowboys and the Eagles. Those are two really tough teams in front of them. And I don't think the Commanders stink. They didn't stink last year, actually, and I don't think they stink this year. They will be tough divisional games. Everyone last year they were 1-5-1 or 1-4-1 in the division, 1-5-1 if you count the Eagles playing the second time. So those are going to be really tough games, and you better win the games you're supposed to win. The Cardinals early on being one of them, if you're going to make the playoffs and have the season you hope, because the NFC East is brutal. And the fact they get the AFC East doesn't make it any easier, because I think the eight of the teams the Giants play of the 8 of the 17 were playoff teams last year, and I got to think the Jets are going to be a playoff team this year. So you've got a brutal schedule ahead of you, so you better win the games you're supposed to win.
Yep, 100%. And just in terms of how brutal it is, PFF earlier this year. Now this is in June. They did this early June. The projected win total for the Giants they had at 8.4, and they talked about how tough this schedule is. According to PFF, just 4 teams had a harder schedule than the Giants: the Bills, the Chargers, the Dolphins, and the Patriots, who had the hardest. So the Giants there with the 5th toughest schedule in the league, at least according to PFF. So that, can they avoid a regression? That's why it's an enormous hurdle for them to do so. What do you think is the Giants' ceiling, and what is the floor for this team in terms of? You said already probably 10-7, 11-6 is what you'll pick. But what's the ceiling and what's the floor for season win total?
11 is the ceiling. The ceiling,
I
think. And I could see a scenario too where they go 8-9. I could see that happening if things don't fall right. If they, get the wrong guys injured, you could see it falling to 8-9. And of course, anytime, if the quarterback were to get hurt, we saw that season in 2021. You saw it up close. I saw it from a distance. It's disaster time. So.
Yeah, and I think every team will obviously have the normal amount of injuries, but just setting aside anything like catastrophic to Daniel Jones, I think the ceiling is 11, and I think the floor is 7. I think that's where things fall for this team. So, well, appreciate everybody listening. Be sure to like, rate, review, subscribe to us on all your favorite podcasting platforms, and we will be back here starting Tuesday next week, and that's, I think, what the schedule. Well, at least next week we'll go week to week, as they say. It's a week-to-week league. And so football is back starting tonight with the Chiefs and Lions, and starting Sunday for the Giants, Sunday night against the Cowboys. Everybody enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy your weekend, and enjoy the game Sunday night. And we will be back with you on Tuesday to talk all things Giants Cowboys and look ahead to the Giants maybe trying to go 2-0 or even up at 1-1 against the Cardinals in Arizona. All right, everybody, take care.